What's up, guys? Are you tired of every build using Tempest Roar or Grizzly Rage, or it just costs too much spirit? Well, let me introduce you to Trampleslide. Now, you've probably seen this build before in a variety of different forms, using a bunch of different setups or uniques, but I felt like no one had really tried to push this build to its maximum potential, so I wanted to give it a try. After my recent boulder fiasco, I was basically broke with no gold and needed something that was very easy to get up and running with minimal investment, which brought me back to my original build I started with in World Tier 3. Let me explain how this build works. Our main source of damage in the build comes from the aspect Trampled Earth. What this does is it creates huge trails of landslides to both the left and right of your character as you trample. What really takes this to the next level is the aspect Aftershock. This makes it so that we get a repeated wave of landslides and increases the damage with each consecutive hit. The main issue with this combo is that it has a decently long cooldown, but we are able to more or less circumvent this with the final aspect, Symbiotic. Basically, what this says is whenever we trigger the Nature's Fury capstone with a Storm skill, it will reduce the cooldowns of our Earth skills. Once we've used Trample, we can spam our basic ability Storm Strike until we get a proc of Nature's Fury and we can trample again. None of this costs any spirit as well, so you can just keep spamming it over and over. One of the best things about this build is just how easy it is to get off the ground. Honestly, you can even start playing the build without any of the aspects at all. You'll just be casting Landslide though, so it'll be a little rough, but doable. I would recommend at least getting the Trampled Earth aspect first. Once you get Aftershock combined with this, it's going to start to feel really strong. You can definitely play the build without Symbiotic as well until you get it. I was also impressed with just how easy it was for me to start running higher level Nightmare dungeons with the no unique setup. I was able to easily push into the mid 60s and still feel relatively comfortable depending on the sigil. I can see this pushing into the low 70s. But the best part is you can easily scale this into a late game version using uniques and push it much higher. Not only can this build put out very high damage, it also has incredible tankiness as well. Through our aspects, skill tree, and Paragon, we're able to get tons of sources of armor, damage reduction, and barrier from Earthen Bulwark. By weaving back and forth with Storm Strike and Trample, we're able to move in and out of a Werebear form to activate multiple sources of damage reduction from things like Iron Fur, Heightened Senses, and the Might aspect. Our Symbiotic aspect also will help reset our Earthen Bulwark cooldown, which not only gives us a sizable barrier, it grants us Unstoppable and the damage reduction from Vigilance. We're also able to easily keep up Fortify with Safeguard and tap into damage reduction from poison enemies thanks to Poison Creeper. Poison Creeper is a very vital ability in this build as it activates many things, and we're able to constantly reset the cooldown through the Spirit Boon Pack Leader. Not only do we gain damage reduction against poison enemies, we gain access to one of our most powerful Paragon nodes, Heightened Malice, and one of our most powerful passives, Envenom. Envenom is extremely strong with our Landslide upgrade, Terramotes, which makes it so that our landslides always crit with increased critical strike damage. We're able to easily generate Terramotes through Poison Creeper constantly being reset, and what I think is a really cool addition to the build, Petrify. Petrify is an enormous AoE stun and is really interesting for a lot of reasons. It can easily generate Terramotes for us. It makes it so both normal monsters and bosses take increased crit damage. It can generate a lot of spirit if we want to burst a lot of enemies with Landslide, but one of the coolest things is that it actually works with our capstone, Nature's Fury. It can cast Cataclysm. When we add in the Spirit Boon, Calm Before the Storm, on top of our high cooldown reduction, you can cast Petrify quite often. Nature's Fury can also spawn tornadoes and lightning storms off of our landslides from Trample, with Cataclysm having a very high lucky hit chance and then casting lightning storms and tornadoes. This gives us much more chances to reset the cooldown of Petrify. I think this build is an amazing option for any point in the game. I leveled as Landslide originally and easily transitioned into this build once I got the aspects, and the only reason I didn't stick with it was because I got a Tempest Roar and really wanted to try the Storm Wolf build. I'm very happy I revisited this build because I have been having a ton of fun with it. I really think this build has the potential to push into really high Nightmare dungeons, so I plan to keep tweaking and refining it because the late game version that uses uniques becomes incredibly strong. Before we jump into it, I want to make sure to remind you guys always check the notes on my builds. I'm trying very hard to put tons of useful information in here. You can see what I think the Nightmare dungeon potential is, how I liked it in Hell Tides, maybe some tips on how to go through your Paragon board if you're leveling up with it, tips about the build in general, some strengths, some weaknesses, the elixirs I like to use with it, and most importantly, down at the bottom, I try to put the stats that I like on each gear slot that you should look for. Let's start by taking a look at the skill tree. Our main ability that we're actually going to be spamming is Storm Strike. Whenever we hit an enemy, we'll gain a 25% damage reduction for 3 seconds. Along with that, we have a chance to immobilize enemies, which will help generate terror motes, and this will be our main source of applying vulnerable aside from the exploit glyph. Down here, we have Landslide. Now, we're not actually casting Landslide most of the time, but by upgrading Landslide, we're actually increasing the damage that the landslides do from trampled earth. So this is really important. We go back here to the Primal Landslide upgrade, which gets us our terror motes, which guarantees that Landslide will be a critical hit and have increased crit damage. We're able to take 1 point in Heart of the Wild so that we can unlock Wild Impulses. This is very important because it increases the cost of our core skills, but we're not actually casting Landslide. This still works on the landslides created by Trampled Earth, so it's very strong. Down here, we have 1 point in Predatory Instinct so that we can get into Iron Fur. This is one of our sources of damage reduction. Whenever we use Trample, we turn into a werebear. While we're trampling, we have this 9% damage reduction, and then for 3 seconds afterwards, we have it as well. So ideally, you're switching in and out of bear and then human form, so you can constantly keep this up and the Storm Strike damage reduction buff. Down here, we have Earthen Bulwark. I'm trying to decide how many points I want to put in this, but 1 actually feels pretty good right now because Symbiotic will constantly be resetting this, and instead of having a really large shield, we're just constantly recasting it for a couple of reasons. It's our main source of unstoppable. Since we're casting Trample all the time, it probably won't be used to get us out of CCs. That's what Earthen Bulwark's for. Not only will this prevent CCs on us, as long as we have Earthen Bulwark barrier up, we're able to use this to get out of crowd control as well. Down here, we have 1 point in Ancestral Fortitude, so we can unlock Vigilance. Now, because we're constantly resetting Earthen Bulwark, we're able to pretty much keep this up 100% of the time. It feels really, really strong. As we move down here, we have one of our best abilities, Poison Creeper. We're not actually really using this for the poison damage. We're going all the way out here to extend the duration of the poison up to 5 seconds because we gained so many bonuses from poison enemies. The cool thing about this too is against a single target like a boss, the passive effect basically keeps a poison up on the target nearly 100% of the time. As we move down the tree, we have 1 point in Trample. We're not actually doing damage with Trample, so we don't need to put more points into it or any points behind it. They don't really help us in any way. Over here, we have this full tree filled out. Crushing Earth, increased damage to slowed, stunned, immobilized, or knocked back enemies. Trample will knock back enemies and will also stun any enemies that hit a wall, so that's one source of that. Our Poison Creeper will immobilize enemies, so that's another source. And then down here, Neurotoxin makes it so that poison enemies are slowed by 8%, which is what our Poison Creeper is doing. So we have tons of ways to apply these CC. Over here, we have Safeguard. This is how we keep our Fortify up all the time, no problem whatsoever. And then down here, we have Stone Guard. When we have our Fortify up, our Earth skills will deal increased damage. We talked about Neurotoxin, then we have our best passive. No matter what, you want to try to fit this into any Druid build you're playing in Venom. This is actually multiplicative crit damage. This is very, very strong. You can see I have it all the way up to 6 out of 3 on my amulet. Down here, we have what I talked about earlier, Petrify. I'm absolutely loving this in the build. I can pretty much trample into a pack of enemies, Poison Creeper, Petrify, everything is CC'd, poisoned, stunned, and they're just getting wrecked by Trampled Earth. It feels amazing. 1 point behind it increases the duration by 1 second, so they're stunned even longer, or we have the critical bonus against bosses even longer. And then back here, we have killing an enemy affected by Petrify grants 25 spirit. You don't have to take this point, but what I really like about this is I can trample into enemies, and then I can use Petrify, and then instead of spamming Storm Strike, if there's like certain monsters I want to target, like the monsters that make it so other monsters take reduced damage, I can use my Landslide to target them out, kill them, and then get my spirit refunded back to me. It feels really strong for just whenever you want to target out certain monsters. Over here we have Defiance. Nature Magic skills deal 12% increased damage to elites. Pretty nice. Natural Disaster. Earth skills deal increased damage to Vulnerable. We're always applying Vulnerable with Storm Strike and Exploit. Resonance. Nature Magic skills deal increased damage. Triple this bonus if an Earth skill is the next skill cast. Storm Scale and vice versa. We use Storm Strike, Trampled Earth. We alternate back and forth. Pretty good combo. Down here, we have another shape-shifting bonus. We have Quick Shift. I'm pretty sure this damage bonus only works on trample portion and not landslide, so this isn't too big of a deal. But behind it, we have Heightened Senses. Shapeshifting into a werewolf or werebear gain 12% damage reduction against elites for 5 seconds. Finally, our capstone, Nature's Fury. Whenever we cast an Earth skill, we have a 20% chance to trigger a free storm skill of the same category. What that means is whenever you're here, like this is the ultimate skills, we cast Petrify, we can trigger a free Cataclysm or vice versa. Whenever we go up here, if we cast a landslide manually, we can trigger a lightning storm or tornado. This will also activate when you trample and the trampled earth landslides hit. You'll see tornadoes coming out, and then lightning storm will actually channel up to 5 lightning strikes when it comes down. Moving on to our gear, remember this is the no unique version. On our helmet, we have the ballistic aspect. Whenever we have fortify, we gain +2 ranks to our earth skills. On my chest piece, I have the might aspect. Whenever we use a basic attack, we gain 20% damage reduction for, this is a minimum roll, 2 seconds all the way up to 6. I'm still trying to find a high rolled one. Anytime we use Storm Strike, even if you don't hit a monster, you'll gain this damage reduction. On the gloves, we have +4 ranks to landslide. Remember, this does affect the landslides from Trampled Earth. We have, I think attack speed's okay, but the big things you want to try to get is critical strike chance and critical damage. You can see I don't have critical damage yet. I'm still working on that. This is where I put the symbiotic aspect. And I have this as a maximum roll at 8 seconds. I don't actually put this on my amulet, and you'll see why in a second. On our pants, we have the disobedience aspect. I don't quite have a maximum roll for this yet. You want to try to get to a 50%. You can see I have a life roll on here. I've kind of been testing out life and damage reduction and armor and trying to get a feel for it. I might try to get a life roll on here instead of basic damage reduction. I'm not sure yet. I'm trying to find that right balance, but lots of defenses on the pants and the chest piece. This aspect is one of the most important aspects, and it is so easy to keep up in this build because Poison Creeper, whenever it ticks for poison damage, counts as 1 stack. So if you hit a huge AoE, you're gonna have this maxed all the time and be so much more tanky. On the boots, I really like Ghostwalker. We're constantly using Trample and Earthen Bulwark, and whenever we trample into monsters, we'll gain Ghostwalker, and then if we need to, we can walk through monsters and move out of the middle of them. On our weapons, we're actually not using a 2-hander and we're dual wielding. The main reason for that is 1-hander plus a offhand totem gets us tons of cooldown reduction and damage reduction. You can see here, I have 10.3% cooldown reduction with almost 14% cooldown reduction. Now, this combination makes it so that our trample is actually almost 8 seconds combined with the cooldown reduction on our helmet. This is why we don't need to actually put the symbiotic aspect on our amulet, and we can put a full damage aspect on our amulet instead. I actually think 1-hand and offhand is much, much stronger than using a 2-hand in its place. You can see here on the amulet, this is where I was able to put my trample earth aspect. Instead of it being only 80% damage, it actually goes all the way up to 120% damage. Because of the cooldown reduction on the totem, again, we don't have to put the symbiotic on our amulet. Back to our weapons. On our weapon, you can see vulnerable damage is always important because we're gaining vulnerable through exploit and storm strike. I have edge masters here. This is great because we're not spending spirit. Whenever we use trample, we're getting the full benefit from this because you can see its skills will deal increased damage based on your available primary resource when cast, which is what's most important. Again, on our amulet, we have Trampled Earth. The most important things you want to look for on your amulet is +3 ranks to Envenom and cooldown reduction. You can see this is my amulet from Stormwolf. I need to fix it. It doesn't have anything else really useful on it, so I'm trying really hard to fix this. You can go for either offensive or defensive approach with your amulet. My ring, this is what you're going to be looking for the stats that I think I like the most. Maximum life, vulnerable damage, crit chance, and crit damage. You can drop the life for more crit damage if you're looking to go more offensive as well. This is where we put our Aftershock aspect that doubles up our landslides and our natural balance aspect. This makes it so that whenever we use Storm Strike, for the next 4 seconds, we have 45% crit damage on our Earth skills. We're constantly rotating back and forth between Earth and Storm, so this is up 100% of the time. On my totem, I have Retaliation. We always have our Fortify basically maxed out, so we're always gaining maximum benefit from this. I have Lucky Hit Chance on this and one of my rings. I'm trying to get rid of those. You don't really need Lucky Hit Chance in this build, even though we use Calm Before the Storm. I'm going to look to try to change this Lucky Hit to crit, but the other stats on it are so good, it's been really hard to change out. Remember, you want a high eye level totem because it does count your damage. For our gems, as usual, we have the damage reduction while fortified in our armor. In our weapon, we have critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. And then in our jewelry, we have skulls for armor. For For our elixirs, you can choose to either go defensive if you're pushing or offensive. For the defensive side, I think maximum life has felt the best so far to me, but you can also use the armor elixir. For offensive, any of the crit damage elixirs, the attack speed elixirs, or the crit chance elixirs I think will work quite well. For our spirit boons, in the deer category, we're going to take wariness for more damage reduction from elites. In the eagle category, I've taken the double point here for attack speed. Here we have Avian Wrath. Moving down here, we have Pack Leader. This is super important for getting resets on our Poison Creeper. We have Calm Before the Storm. This is for our Petrify. Nature Magic skills have a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate skill by 2 seconds. Finally, we're going to take a look at the Paragon tree. This is my fully finished Paragon tree with the unique version. I didn't want to take out points just for the non-unique version, but make sure you're checking the build down below. It has the non-unique version of the Paragon tree. You're always going to go up through your starter tree. You're going to look to get the exploit glyph first and get that leveled up to 15 as soon as possible. This is going to completely increase your damage like nothing else will. Make sure you're always focusing on this and the starter tree in every druid build. As we move all the way up here, we have the next board, the Survival Instincts board. Now, you can go for this node early. Basically, when you're trampling, you'll be gaining the sort of execute damage bonus. The way this works is as the monsters go lower in health, you'll deal more damage. I don't super recommend this until you get the unique setup, so you don't actually need to go this right away. We just kind of work our way up through these nodes over to this socket here, Territorial. This gives us damage reduction and increased damage to close enemies. We're trampling into enemies and we're always going to be close to them. We pass through here for some more damage reduction, all the way down here to Heightened Malice. Remember, this is what is activated through Poison Creeper. 3 or more poison enemies nearby, you deal increased damage. We trample in, we Poison Creeper, we instantly gain this bonus for all our trampled earths coming through. Very strong. As we work our way up through here, we get over to the glyph, Fang and Claw. This is going to be the second glyph you want to focus to level up. The main reason is because of the pathing, we're almost solely going through magic nodes through here, and this is going to boost the effect of all the magic nodes. If you notice, you can grab the int node or the dex node depending on what your stats are over here. If you need to hit some other rare breakpoints, that's up to you. Now, you want to make sure you actually move into this tree, the Thunderstruck tree next. The reason for that is, as you can see here, I'm able to hit the breakpoints on both of these rare glyphs for 440 intelligence. The breakpoints are dependent on the order that you add your skill trees in, so make sure you do this tree third after the starter tree. We have damage reduction from vulnerable enemies here, which is really, really strong. As we dive in, our exploit glyph applies vulnerable, so we're getting that damage reduction. On the glyph socket, we have Undaunted, even more damage reduction while we're fortified, damage while we're fortified, and then we grab some crit damage nodes and damage to crowd controlled enemies over here. We can then move up into the Constricting Tendrils tree. I did try the Constricting Tendrils legendary node. I think this works with the build, but if I'm being honest, I didn't really notice that much increased Terra Mote gain, and that's pretty much all this would be for. The poison, we already have tons of poison with Poison Creeper, and this chance is pretty low anyway. You can definitely go for this if you want, but I didn't really feel like I was getting much value out of it. Instead, we're going to make sure to grab the glyph here. This is our Spirit glyph, where we need to go for critical strike damage, and then every time we crit, the enemy will take increased damage from us. We're able to fill out, you can see all the dex nodes here pretty much as we path through the tree and grab a couple extra here, and then we can move into the Earthen Devastation tree. Now, this node, our skills deal increased damage to enemies afflicted by crowd control. Feels really good because we're applying crowd control through Poison Creeper, which will immobilize and slow with Neurotoxin, along with Petrify, which will stun. We have a little bit of armor nodes over here as we path through more critical strike damage. And then finally, here we have the Werebear glyph. Now, the way this works is as we're trampling, we'll be in Werebear form and we'll have 10% damage reduction and then damage while we're still in that form. Eventually, once you get the unique setup again, you'll be in Werebear form much more often, so this will gain more value. This is also why it's at the end of the tree. You're not going to get this until you're a much higher level and you've probably gained the uniques. But again, this is the non-unique version of the build, not needed, so no big deal. That's going to be it for this video. Remember, this is the non-unique sort of starter mid-game version of the build. I have a unique version of the build that I've been working on, so keep an eye out for a video if I don't have that out already by the time you're watching this. I think the build has a potential to push really, really far. I don't think it's as strong as the Stormwolf build, but I don't think any other build really can be. That build is pretty insane. I do think this build though is really fun and has great potential to do a lot of things. If you guys have any questions, as always, leave them in the comment section below and I'll try my best to answer them. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.